part of Play Acting Theatre. We're delighted to support Catherine in producing this and preparing the show for tonight. And we'd just like to thank also the Skull Business Association who also supported tonight. And just...
And my mom, she would have slitted the throats of some chickens and turkeys, but that's what you did when you had a family farm in rural Ireland. That's what their parents did before them. Even as a lifelong vegetarian, I wouldn't be inclined to call them murderers in that story. So I said to the tomato plant, because I knew where it was going with like this, I said, if you want to write a song denouncing my parents as being liars and murderers, you're going to have to sing it yourself, because I have an inheritance to consider. I don't know if you've ever crossed swords with a tomato plant, but they're a little bit sensitive, maybe a bit passive aggressive. There was quiet first, and then it said, fine so. do you want tomatoes for your sandwiches? Why don't you grow them yourself? And without thinking, I said, but I am growing them. That's what I have here on my kitchen table for. I'm growing the tomatoes. The tomato plant could barely contain itself. I said, you're growing the tomatoes? You're growing the tomatoes. And what exactly am I doing here? Oh, let's see, I'm bringing up the water and the minerals from the soil up through my stem and out through my branches and into my leaves. And with these leaves, I'm capturing the sun's light that's traveling at 186,000 kilometers per second. I'm capturing the light traveling at 186,000 kilometers per second, and I'm converting it into food. So now I, who am made of and by the earth, I'm also made of and powered by a star 93 million miles away. I'm like a transplanetary being. How amazing is that? But it gets even more amazing, because in the course of time I will bring forth flowers. And these flowers are life signal to the insects that it's their time to come and partake of this co-creation of earth and sun. And after they have feasted of my body, they will leave me fertile and ready for the next stage of my life. The stage in which I will bring forth the fruit that you call tomatoes. Now, what exactly is it you have done in this process? So, of course, I hadn't done very much, had I? I was a bit, humiliated, I was cut out. I like to think of myself as a bit of an enlightened gardener, but here I was taking credit for something I hadn't done at all. So I said, look, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it was just a figure of speech. A figure of speech? You actually believe you're growing these tomatoes. It's like, you believe it, just like your father believes he's growing the grass and he's feeding the cows. And the farmers in West Limerick and North Kerry, they think that they're producing the milk. They think they're producing the milk. And your neighbour thinks he's growing the trees. And your mother thought she was rearing the chickens. She actually believed this, he said. And okay, you do the first one. But he said, I said he, and it was she in the previous show. He believed it, but not one of you can convert the air, or the soil, or the sun, or the water into food, can you? You can no more do that now than I can sing a song. You're completely dependent on us for everything that you are, and everything that you have. And the one thing that we ask of you in return, the one thing that we ask of you, is that you might sing our song. Well, since it had put it like that, it did feel a bit petty of me to say like I wouldn't sing a song, so I said, look, fine, I'll sing your song, fine, so I'll sing it. But you can't be calling my parents liars and murderers, okay? There is an inheritance, there's 7 of us, but still. But said, no bother, we'll do that. That was just our first attempt, we were just trying to get your attention. So then, why don't you go back to bed now, which is where you like to spend most of your time. And we'll work away the song, and accordingly, if it's ready, we'll pass it on to you. Thought fair enough. And sure enough, every time I lay down after that, a portion of the song was transplanted into my head, pretty much whole and entire. There's been very little editing in what you're going to hear. A little bit of pruning, a little bit of shaping, because they can get a bit unruly if they're left to themselves. But mostly this is not my work. This is Bothering the Dead, part 1. Than the lies, the stories, and the mysteries she heard. She learned it from her mother how to bargain and carve up this world. Learned it from her mother, who I guess learned it from hers. Now I got all these women sitting on my shoulders. My daddy was a sorcerer, he made the whole world disappear. I don't know how he did it, but he hid it like he hid all his fears. He learned from his daddy and so on back in time. Learned from his daddy just like I learned it from mine. And all these things become my eyes. Yeah. I get it from my granddad. I like to spend my days in bed, dreaming of whiskey and women and trying to forget. I said, Grandad, would you tell me where it was you buried those guns? He take me all around the cemetery, but haven't shown me one. I said, Grandma, won't you tell me what it is we're trying to forget? He said, girl, don't you know better than to come around bothering the dead? Satan was an emperor specialized in women's underclothing. Surrender to Caesar, and we gave up all our fears and our self-loathing. Nobody seemed to mind was it a crime if nobody got hurt. And if we got nothing for nothing, well, at least then we knew what we were worth. And all these things become my eyes. Yeah, all these things become my light, become my light, become my sight, become mine. Way back there was a carpenter, he poured himself all into the wood. Ah, but the colour of truth didn't take like they thought it should. The story was retold, he was bought and sold for what it said on the label. I guess you lose your taste for truth when you're dining at the emperor's table. I came across an old man who was staggering from the emperor's table. They had just done a deal to turn the land into fields, and the man could take all he was able. There was no talk of gold, no selling of souls, but the emperor had claimed a prize. And when she arose, she said, behold your new clothes. The thought I've taken the sight from your eyes. And if that old man cried in his sleep that night, there were tears he couldn't afford. All of his children needing them to clothe and to feed them, and a bailiff banging on the door. And all these things become my eyes. Yeah, all these things become my light, become my light, become my sight, become mine. My uncles, they were astronauts, all floating out above their hearts. Above the beatings and betrayals and all the lies that tear a body apart. Way up above this earth, up where they thought salvation could be won. They floated high, they floated free, up where they didn't need to see. They were good and they were righteous. They were gone. And if children cried in their sleep at night for the life and the love they had lost, those who should have saved them from the beatings and the rapings, they were walking the stations of the cross. So, like I was saying, I come from a good, decent, upstanding Catholic family in West Limerick. And I had probably the benefit of one of the best Catholic upbringings you could hope for. I had daily rosaries, weekly masses, novenas, stations of the cross. On Saturday mornings I went to the Legion of Mary, and on Sunday mornings I stood in the kiosk outside the church selling the leaflets and the Messenger and Catholic. So what I'm basically saying is there were no deficiencies in this area of my upbringing. And still, it only took a week or maybe 6 months doing philosophy in college for me to sort of come to the realization that it didn't make a whole lot of sense in some regards. And I could either be a philosopher, I could be logical, or I could be a believer, and so I chose the philosopher's side. And even though I had a lifelong, deep and personal relationship with Jesus Christ, and I was a pretty pious child, I didn't really miss him. It didn't really touch me deeply. But I knew my mother would miss him. And I wasn't looking forward to going home and telling her. And I was expecting her to say something like, you think you're so smart now you're doing philosophy, or you're letting the whole family down, or you're a bad example for your younger sisters and brothers. But my mother surprised me with her response when I told her that I was now an atheist. She said, so you're calling me and your father and your grandparents and all your ancestors, you're calling us all liars. Now, it hadn't occurred to me that anybody was lying, not my parents, not my grandparents, not the priests or the bishops or the popes. I just thought everybody was passing on what they believed to be true in good faith. So anyway, fortunately for me, that was a rhetorical question on my mother's part. And she passed it on to my father, and she said, what do you have to say about your daughter declaring herself an atheist? And my dad, being my dad, just shrugged and said, it's time for the 6 o'clock news. That's my dad. But the reality is my dad had actually given up on me years before when I don't know if any of you are familiar with the bog, but the bog, we spent lots of long, arduous hours in the bog when we were younger. And one day, apparently, he sent me home for not putting the turf properly. Now, if any of you have spent time in the bog, you know you don't get sent home from the bog. It's like Alcatraz, you get sent to the bog, you don't get sent home. And there aren't very many ways to put the turf. So somehow I aggravated him so much that he just sent me home. And I think since that day, if he decided I couldn't be edified on how to put the turf, he wasn't going to get into it with me on matters ecclesiastical. So that was my father. Later that evening, I went out and I talked to my younger brother, who was probably leaving cert at that point. And I said, I was a bit smug now, because I thought I could impress him. I said, the parents aren't going to be in good shape this evening because I just told them I was an atheist. My brother turned and looked at me with this mixture of pity and contempt. Why did you have to go telling them? None of us believes in God, but we're not going to go telling them and upset them. Why couldn't you lie like the rest of us? My world fell apart. Lie to my parents about God. Like if you could lie about God and lie to your parents, you could lie about anything. That was just unfathomable to me. Of course, I didn't say anything. I just shrugged like I wasn't letting on. But along with that, it was humiliating because my brother hadn't done Philosophy 101 or Philosophy 102. He hadn't even gone to college. And he had figured it out all by himself. I didn't even know there was a question about God's existence till I went to college. So I think between the shock and the humiliation, I just put the whole thing to the back of my mind because it was just too much for me. I repressed it more or less. And it wasn't until years later when I had that transmission from the tomato plant where there was a suggestion that there was a lot of lying and deception and treachery going on in my family. That's when this memory resurfaced. And then one night I flew. I flew out of the seeing of my eyes and down through the stories of a lifetime. And all the while I was flying, I knew I was being taken to see something important. Some old family secret I had long suspected, but could never name. The first place I landed was my family home in West Limerick, where I discovered that my father was personally responsible for global warming and rising sea levels. I challenged him on this, and at first he denied it, and then seeing I would not be put off, my father tried to kill me with a chair. Fortunately, I am the sorcerer's daughter, and so I can disappear and reappear at will. I disappeared, and then I reappeared on the banks of a river somewhere in the United States. Only it wasn't yet the United States. I could tell by the way people were dressed that these were the early days of colonization. And as I adjusted to my surroundings, I noticed the grasses and the trees and the reeds on the banks of the river. I noticed them, and then gradually I started to recognize them. These were the family secret I had long suspected, but could never name. Here they were, the people the Native Americans called the tree people, the stone people, the fish people. And now I saw that they were my people. They were my brothers and sisters. But somehow this truth had been hidden from me. They had been cut off, disappeared, banished from my seeing. But now that I could see them, I understood deeply that these were my family. And with this recognition of kinship came another realization. The realization that they were alive. That the world was alive. And I hadn't even known that I thought it was dead until I saw what it was. To see that it was alive. As the enormity of what I'd seen and what had been done sunk in, I turned to go in search of my mother to demand some kind of an explanation. But my mother had seen that I had seen and knew I would not remain silent, so she lifted a rifle and she shot me. Now, if the rules of physics had applied, I would have been murdered by my parents for the second time that evening. But fortunately for me, this was a vision. And I had time to raise a musket gun I found in my right hand. I aimed it at my mother, and I shot. And even though I knew the shot from my musket gun was much slower than the shot from her rifle, I had complete faith in the power and righteousness of that musket ball to overcome my mother and all she represented on the banks of that river 400 years ago. When I returned from my vision, I was in a bit of a state. I had been shown that my parents were liars and murderers of the worst order. I'd been shown what they would do if their daughter tried to expose them for what they had done. And even if I could summon the courage to expose them, who would I tell? Because really, other than being liars and murderers, my parents are pretty good and decent people. So it was obvious to me that if I did that, I would be seen as the troublesome one, the troubled one. And when I thought about it more, if I was going around talking about a vision about the world being alive and my parents being liars and murderers. But if my mother had gone around talking about that vision, or my grandmother, they would have been put in an institution for troubled women, because that's what happened to people who spoke like that back then. And 400 years ago, when women spoke about seeing the world as alive and being related to them, they were burned at the stake. So the history of visions and truth-telling has not been encouraging. And I haven't a shred of a strand of the DNA required for martyrdom. It's just not in me. So in the end, I decided to do the only thing I could do, the thing that I do have the DNA for. I decided to take to my bed. And it was all pretty gradual at first, but then I went to bed for 3 years. Now I think this culture has yet to explore the benefits of a good long nap. Because while I was in that bed, I underwent a profound transformation. Before I went to bed, I was a penniless songwriter with a philosophy degree. When I got up, I was a proud owner of an acre of land in West Cork, with a half-built house with a compost toilet and a grass roof. How did that happen? I knew it had something to do with my father, the sorcerer, and my mother, the liar, but I didn't inquire into it any further, which I suppose, entitlement and privilege never likes to inquire into the source of their good fortune. Anyway, I decided I would just get on with finishing my house and going out and exerting my dominion over all the other creatures who were living on the land. And it was all going well, and one evening, I came back from relocating a family of slugs into my neighbour's garden. And I came back to discover that my other neighbour's cows had relocated into my front lawn. Now, I might not look like the kind of person who takes a lot of pride in her lawn, but still, there were hoof marks on it and something needed to be done. So I said to them, look, my lawn, my grass, your field, your grass. Could you move along over? They took absolutely no notice of me, right? And eventually one of them looked up and said something about coming to claim the dividends of its relatives over in West Limerick. And I said, what are you on about, the dividends of your relatives? And it went on to explain how its relatives in West Limerick several generations ago, my father had taken their milk, stolen their milk and their calves, sent it off to Kerry Co-op, the creamery. It had gone into making the milk products that had made Kerry Co-op such a successful business. And of course it made the farmers, who were the shareholders, made them wealthy. And my father cashed in on that, of course, and that went towards buying the piece of land I had. And the cow said to me, because my cows talk, the cow said to me that those cows in West Limerick, they got no dividend. They didn't get a bale of hay, they didn't get so much of a thank you. So we've come here now today to claim our bit of grass. I think that's fair enough. So basically they were engaged in typical left-wing restorative justice ideology, right? And normally I'd have a bit of sympathy for that, but this was my lawn. But I decided I'd try negotiation, and I tried to explain to them how the only reason there was a blade of grass there at all was because of my capital investment in a strimmer. And then because I had put so much labour in strimming, so really, it was really down to me that there was any grass there at all. Now, in retrospect, talking to cows about strimmers and lawnmowers is not a good starting point for negotiations. And everything went downhill from there. And there was no progress to be made. So eventually I did what I probably should have done in the first place, what any self-respecting colonizer would do. I got a stick and I chased them around. But right before they left, one of them turned around and said, oh yeah, your granny said to ask you, who was left at the table? I said, who was left at what table, and what does my granny have to do with it? She just said, who was left at the table? And then it took off down the road and over across to the field next to me, and all the other cows took up the chant too. Who was left at the table all night? Who was left at the table? I get up in the morning, go out for Brussels sprouts, because I like Brussels sprouts for my breakfast. Went to pick one. Who was left at the table? Went to move a slug. There was no peace to be gotten. I thought I was going to go mad. Eventually it became apparent that until I solved that riddle of who was left at the table, I would never get a moment of peace in my land. So I decided I needed to talk to my granny. Now, my granny had been dead a long time by this stage, and I'm not in the habit of bothering the dead. But she had set the cows on me, so she should have known. She should have known that I'd be coming for her. My granny and the Virgin Mary were identical twins. Not even the lies of 2,000 years could separate them. My granny loved the Virgin and my uncle loved her son. And if that seems a little strange to you, well, now you know just where I get it from. I said, Granny, won't you tell me about this war going on in my head? She said, listen to your granddad, don't be coming around bothering the dead. I said, but Granny, I come from a long line of liars and murderers, sorcerers, astronauts too, warmongers, witch-burners, all saying the same things as you. Ecociders and genociders. I said, Granny, how could this be? Slave drivers and child sodomizers, all praying to the same God as me. It was just like I was taught. I prayed to the God of my mother and my forefathers. A God who could not love his children. A God who would betray his daughters. I said, mothers, would you tell us why we're teaching our children these lies? They said, girl, you don't know nothing until you've seen your son beaten and crucified. So I followed them down to the foot of the cross, all those who had gone out before me. My granny, my granddad, the whole damn lot, all praying and tried to ignore me. I said, Jesus, I don't mean to bother you. I can see you're busy forgiving. But if you think this is the end of it, well, you should know it's just the beginning. Because they'll kill and they'll lie, they'll steal and they'll torture, they'll burn and they'll bomb and they'll maim. They'll rape and invade, they'll march and they'll conquer, and they'll do it all in your name. They'll forget what you said about the lily of the field, they'll forget about the stars in the sky. They'll forget all about turning the other cheek, but they'll remember an eye for an eye. And I know it's not your fault, and I know you're not to blame, and you probably can't change any of this, but I guess now what I'm saying is, I don't care if you can raise the dead. I don't care if you can walk in water. I don't care if your mother was a virgin or who you think is your father. It's just I've been raised to praise the dead. I've got no prayers for the living. And I've drunk your blood and I've eaten your bread still. I've got no way of forgiving. So it seems to me that somebody somewhere forgot something important you said. And if you tell me what it is I'm looking to know, well, I won't need to bother you after you're dead. Jesus said, I don't care what you believe or if you believe in me. I don't care that you share the emperor's taste in women's lingerie. Now I can take you where you want to go, I can show you what you're looking to see. But I don't see how you could believe any of it if you don't believe in me. Well, I said, Jesus, you might have a point there, but since I've been raised with religion, I have a natural blind spot for hypocrisy and contradictions. Yeah, I get from my daddy, you can't argue with me. So you might as well get down off that cross and show me what I'm looking to see. When Jesus laughed, he said, that's not how it works, not for you and not for me. And the next thing I knew, I was stretched on a cross and I was screaming in agony. And all of a sudden, I didn't care about truth or love or understanding or learning to see. All I cared about was getting off the cross and killing the bastard who would put me there. Now, ordinarily, escaping from a cross would prove no obstacle to an escapologist such as myself. I am, after all, the sorcerer's daughter. My uncles were all astronauts, flying and floating off above the pain. That's all second nature to me. But this time I couldn't move, and the more I struggled, the more forcefully I was held to that cross. And so I looked over to see if I could ascertain what kind of stakes were restraining me, but I couldn't see anything. And still something was holding me down. It was pushing me down. Pulling me down. Over all that moves unseen, I rose supreme. I haunt your dreams. I am the force of sight. I come in the night. I burn long and I burn harsh, I burn bright. I am the light. Here I am again. Yeah, here I am again. Here I am again. Here I am again. Going down. cell I built for my own mind, only to find that here I am again, that here I am again, here I am again, here I am again, going down the shards of my wings by my side. Down where there is no beacon, no light. Down with only my breath as my guide. I've been here before. I built the walls, I laid the floor, I locked the door. I said no more, but now here I am. Here I am again. Gone down to the terror that I could not know. Down to the places where love cannot flow. To be lost, to be found in my soul. So, stretched on a cross in agony, down into hell. This is the kind of religious imagery and metaphor you get when you've had a deeply immersive Catholic upbringing. And I thought when I had decided I didn't believe in God that I could walk away from the religion of my ancestors, but it turns out that religion isn't just a set of beliefs and stories you can just put down when you no longer believe in them. It's more like an operating system or a virus that continues to live on inside you. It continues to influence and shape how you see the world. And I had a rather cruel lesson in this when I was doing a meditation retreat, and I was these 10-day retreats, and my meditation was very poor. My attention was very poor. It was all over the place. And at the end of it, I found myself doing a process, and then half consciously, and then I realized what I was doing was I was reviewing and trying to see if maybe I got up around 68 or 69% attention level, because that was close to 70, and 70 was a B, and if I got close enough, maybe a benevolent external examiner might boost me up to the 70%. So here I was, an atheist/Buddhist, in a moment of despair, invoking this external God who might come and make it all better for me and give me a B. I was disgusted with myself. Not only that I was still kind of engaged in religious thinking, but also it was a very poor strategy, because the God who we grew up with wasn't in the business of intervening to make things better. He wasn't in the business of giving Bs, was he? It was well understood that if you wanted a B, you actually had to work for it. I mean, you were supposed to pray too, but like you had to work for it, right? He was what theologians called a non-interventionist God, and this created great problems, because how could you have an all-good, all-powerful God who allowed suffering in the world? Why wouldn't he intervene? That was a big question. It continues to dog believers today. But to me, the bigger question is, why would you invent such a God in the first place? I mean, normally you'd invent a God because you want him to intervene. You want him to intervene to smite your enemy, or to bring rain, or to help you get a B. But our God couldn't be dependent on for any of that. Like a God who wouldn't intervene to get his own son off the cross, he wasn't going to lift a finger to help you find your car keys. So the next question becomes, how do we tolerate it? How do we reconcile ourselves to it? Well, the first answer is we had no choice. But the second answer, I think, is that we felt we had access to a whole other pantheon of intercessionary, interventionist beings. So we had the patron saints and the angels and all the rest, who actually did the work on the ground. They helped us find our car keys, or did the patron saints of exam students and songwriters and all that. The highest of all these intercessionary beings in Ireland was the Blessed Virgin Mary. This is unusual in the Catholic Church for a woman to have such an exalted position, and I think it's probably because it was kind of understood that because of all God had put her through, an exception needed to be made for her. It probably helped also that she was a virgin. That probably got her a few extra points in the interview process. But anyway, the women of Ireland, in particular the grannies, had great devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. My granny was a loyal, just avid follower of her, that people were saying about her. She had great devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And she had reason to be, like her son. I have an uncle who's a Kiltegan missionary. So she had, in common with the Blessed Virgin Mary, a son who was out spreading the word of God. So the Blessed Virgin Mary would have known what it was like for my granny, who would have worried about her son. He would have worked tirelessly on behalf of the poor. He would have spoke out against corruption and injustice. He would have challenged people who were powerful, even though they may have retaliated against him. Now, I'm sure my granny never had this conversation with the Blessed Virgin Mary. It was never this bald, but I'm sure she thought at some level that all the rosaries she said, and all the novenas she went to, and all the grandchildren she sent to the Legion of Mary, that would in some way incentivize the Blessed Virgin Mary to take extra special care of her son. Now, I don't know if she did or she didn't, but on December 9th, 2009, my uncle, at the age of 72, was taken from his bed, tied to a chair, and beaten to death. And the reason we're told that happened, I'm sure it was a build-up, but was that he was challenging local Christians who were murdering local Muslims who had previously been murdering Christians, and he was saying that this really isn't on and it's not a Christian way, and this is what happened. But of course it was hugely traumatic in our family. And months after it happened, I found myself writing this song I was getting through just a verse of it, and I would keep coming to the chorus and keep getting stuck. And I would find myself in floods of tears, but I couldn't figure out what it was I was saying. I knew my volition was somehow to bring some kind of comfort to my mother. And the obvious thing to say was that he's with his mother in heaven, he's with his father in heaven, he's finally found peace. But of course, as I want to say quite such a strong atheist at that time, but those words didn't flow for me, they didn't feel right. And I couldn't write them. So night after night, I'd be drawn to do this song, and I couldn't make any progress. And then one morning I woke up, and I just had this complete sense of peace and something very different, my different sensibility around the world. And I realized that I had this sense that all the ancestors were right there, and in particular my uncle and my grandmother. It was like they were right there. And there was this sense that actually nobody had ever gone anywhere. It was just, for a while in this life, we have this sensibility or this sense that there was a separation, there was a veil, and you hear people talk about that, but I really had a strong sense of it. And so there was this message or sense in me that there was no reason to grieve because Granny and my uncle hadn't gone anywhere, everything was fine. So that gave me my first mystical experience, but it also gave me the words to finish my song. So here we go. And now your eternity's done. We walk on alone. Bells of time have rung. You are going home. And though we stay behind, still through our grief we see. No matter where we are, you will always be. Here in every breath we take in time. Here in every sorrow we'll share. Here in all ways we find love, and in all that we do love. And now your light has shone, your laughter heard no more. On all the songs you sung, as you spun around the floor, but in all the hearts you touched, the other side of my family, to the uncle, my father has two sisters who are Mercy Order nuns. Let me go back a generation. One of them is the most unorthodox, irreverent pagan of a nun you could ever hope to have in your family. Brilliant. And she's the reason I live in West Cork. I used to visit her in Ross Carberry. She had this ecology project there. And I turned up about 11 or 12 o'clock and she was just getting out of bed. She'd have mischief in her mind. She'd say, Catherine, you know, I think I do my best work inside the bed. I say, Kathy, I know I'm the exact same. Like all the important experiences of my life, all the extraordinary experiences, all the ones that orient me to who I am, they happened either while I was in bed or shortly after getting out. And if you've been tracking the show, like the mystical experience, the transmission, the visions, all in the bed or after getting out, right? The corollary to this, of course, is that none of them happened while I was in a church. None of them happened while I was praying. You know, and like I said, I was a pretty pious child. I spent a lot of time in church. Now, when I first decided that God didn't exist, I was saying earlier, I wasn't upset or angry, because I didn't think anybody was lying or there was any malintent. But of course, since then, we've all learned a lot about abuse and lying and cover-ups and how much harm there is done, and really how much reason we have to be angry at the church. But there are other reasons to be angry too, and I didn't touch in on them until much later. And my first recollection of feeling, allowing myself to just feel it, was actually, ironically enough, in another meditation retreat where I was looking for peace and equanimity. After about 4 days or 5 days of nothing happening, just sort of, I felt my heart opening sort of fractionally, and then had this experience of just love, so that impersonal love they talk about, just love flowing. And then a huge sense of gratitude for the teacher and the teaching, just spontaneous arising, right? Within 2 seconds, there also arose a rage of the tradition I had grown up in. A rage like, where was the love in that tradition? Where was the orientation to love? At the center of that tradition was the image of a man whose message was about love and who died loving in the face of the worst assault ever. But we were never oriented to that in my remembrance. We were told to love, but our orientation was to get to heaven. To do whatever we could do to be good so that we'd be gotten into heaven. There was no suggestion that actually that love of itself here and now was attainable, or that was it. So I feel like spiritually there was a huge travesty going on there in terms of where we're oriented. Anyway, where I'm getting to here is by the time I met Jesus at the foot of the cross, I had a lot to say. And as you've heard, I think I did it pretty diplomatically. I don't think I was unnecessarily hostile. I just brought him up to date on the affairs of his followers. And I said, look, there seems to be a bit of a disparity here in what you were suggesting and how we've been. And maybe you've left something out or something is being misunderstood. And if you feel a sin, well, I won't need to bother you after you're dead. That seemed reasonable enough, right? Next thing I knew, I'm on a cross, in agony, right? I'm not happy to be there. I can't reconcile myself to this. Why is it happening to me? I mean, there's a lot of people, I think, could use a good crucifixion. But I think I'm one of the good people. I mean, we all do, really, but I have a grass roof and a compost toilet, and it's bumper stickers that say free to bed. I mean, like, why was it happening to me? And there are some people, when bad things happen to them, they go inside to blame themselves. I think that's a terrible idea, but, like, my mother does that, right? When my younger sister came out as gay, because she couldn't let me have the limelight, right? She came out, and I went home a few weeks later. I don't even know if I knew that she'd come out at this point, and my mother was really upset. I said, what's wrong, Mom? And she said, I think I must have been a bad mother or done something really wrong to have 2 daughters who are lesbians. I said to myself that I might need to breathe. Maybe oblivious of the offence. And then I said, Mother, you know, you didn't really do anything wrong. It's not that you're a bad mother. It's just that you sent us all to the Legion of Mary during our formative years. That's where we were taught to love women. In fact, you're lucky all 5 of your daughters aren't lesbians. My mother doesn't ask me for assurance on this front anymore, right? So I'm not like that. I don't go inside to blame myself. I sort of, and in this instance I didn't need to, because it was pretty obvious that it was Jesus, my granny, and the Blessed Virgin Mary that had put me on the cross, right? So I would explain that to my therapist, because I was in pain, and I would say to my therapist, Jesus, granny, and the Blessed Virgin Mary will crucify me. The therapist said, well, we'll put Jesus and the Blessed Virgin Mary aside. Why would your granny want to crucify you? I said, probably because I called her a liar. You know, I thought she was dead and I'd get away with it, but you don't call your granny a liar and not expect to have to reap the consequences. So she said, okay, but would you like to look at your role in this? Because she was one of these people who wants to go inside. I said, no, I don't need to. It was Granny, Jesus, and the Blessed Virgin Mary, and maybe the cows were involved with the setup, maybe the tornado plan, but I am an innocent victim in this. well, if you say the word victim to a therapist, it's like they won the lottery. So she said, next thing she said was, is there anything in your family upbringing that might cause you to identify as a victim? So I told her about being sent to the Legion of Mary from the age of 10 to 16. I told her about my brother being a pathological liar. I told her a few more things, but she didn't think any of this would account for the damage she was seeing before her. I thought, well, this is therapy, I should be able to tell her. So I told her about my vision and how I'd seen on the bank of a river 400 years ago, I'd seen the grasses and the trees and the reeds. They were clothed more finely than Solomon in all his glory and burning with the light of all creation, and how I'd seen that these luminous beings were my brothers and sisters, but somehow this seeing had been denied to me. They had been cast out, banished from my seeing, disinherited. I said, or maybe I had been disinherited. I said, I don't know, but something terrible happened, and I went to talk to my mother about it, and she shot me. My own mother shot me. Do you think that might account for the damage that you're seeing before you? Well, you know when a therapist gets that look in their eye where they don't actually believe what you're saying. They won't say it, of course. They'll just say something more like, well, perhaps we could bring ourselves back to the here and now and just breathe. I didn't need to be paying her €50 an hour to tell me to breathe, right? And if I was happy with the here and now, I wouldn't be going to her in the first place. So I might have been in agony on the cross, but I was still my father's daughter. €50 with €50. I kept my hand in my pocket, walked out the door, and went straight home to my bed. And I was lulled to sleep that evening by this intoxicating mixture of self-righteousness, self-pity, and indignation. Blissfully oblivious to the fact that my granny was about to stage an intervention. Break. We'll take a 10-minute break and come back and see what my granny's up to. And then she came, in the middle of the night, she came naked as the day she was born. And I knew her by the twinkle in her eye and the way she held me in her arms. And behind her was a long line of women, each one so proud, the one that came before her. Oh, I knew them well. These were the women who were hanging on my shoulders. I said, mothers, oh grandmothers, I don't know how this got so serious. I was just doing what you told me. And the next thing, I was hanging from this cross. Now here I am, I'm cold and desperate. I am struggling to take another breath. And if you don't get me off this cross here, well, soon I'll be with you hanging with the dead. They said, daughter, oh granddaughter, you didn't listen to a single word we said. Didn't we tell you, didn't we warn you, not to come around here bothering the dead? Now here you are, threatening to visit. Oh, and your granddad said it's more than he could bear. So I suppose we're gonna have to help you, but first you must change out of those clothes you wear. I said, mothers, you do torment me with such talk of trivialities. If I'm to die upon a cross here, well, at least I will die wearing what I please. And anyway, beloved mothers, was it so terrible, was it so wrong to be doing what I do here? I was just following the promise of a song. They said, daughter, oh granddaughter, you know you are your mother's cross to bear. Well, it's no wonder she tried to shoot you, and your daddy tried to kill you with a chair. Now for once, shut up and listen. Listen with your heart and not your head. You know that's all you ever really need here. You've got no fault to come bothering the dead. I said, mothers, how Christian can not all just get along. If my character had displeased you, well, I'm sure you know just where I get it from. Now I am cold, I am dying, I am hungry, I am tired, I am lost. Would you not talk to yourselves here and tell them get me off the shining cross? They said, daughter, we are so pleased to see you have such faith in us. Oh, but it seems you are mistaken. You misunderstand the nature of your cross. Though you be good, though you be righteous, while you wear the sorcerer's clothes, you will go cold, you will go blind here, for there was no love in the bargain that you chose. Then I fell to the floor of all that I was, the stories, the hurts, and the lies, down through the secrets of all my ancestors, their bargains and their self-sacrifice. I fell past my granny, my granddad, and all those who had gone out before them. And as I passed them, I saw their hearts stricken and raw, alone with no one to console them. I fell past the bishops, the priests, their holy wells and their holy Marys, the unwanted looks, the unwanted touch, the unwanted women and babies. Then I fell past all those whose desires ran like mine, but in times when such love was condemned, and all of their lives they never could share or speak of what they held within. Yeah, I tumbled and fell through my own private hell, full of sorcerers, murderers, and liars. We were all doing deals, finding ways not to feel, and teaching each other to fly. Yeah, again and again we were holding it in. The fear, the desire, the self-loathing. My mother and child just wanting to sing. My daddy just wanting somebody to hold me. Then I came to my uncles, beaten and drowning, struggling to take their last breaths. And I stood with my grannies, helpless before. So much we've been trying to forget. Then I found myself back where all bargains were made, back at the emperor's table. There I was again, a child promising to be good, to be righteous and faithful. Yeah, I was making a deal, refusing to feel the terror, the shame, the self-loathing. I remembered it then, the panic and when I had traded my body for clothing. There was no talk of gold, no selling of souls, but my clothes fitted me to perfection. I was righteous and proud, no one could touch me now, in my cloak of judgment and rejection. And I stood with my daddy, my granddad, and all those who had answered that call. I stood there at the altar, the sorcerer's daughter, who had learned to feel nothing at all. Well, I looked at the emperor and she looked at me. Said, how could this death be forgiven? She said the sorcerer's daughter must forget what he taught her and remember the dead to the living. Then the emperor stood and I remember the wood, and so I mistook the truth for a label. As I cut out my eyes, they are swollen with lies. I'm not worthy to sit at this table. And then the stories and lies all fell from my eyes. For a moment I found I could see. The emperor smiled. She said, it's been a while. Or have you forgotten me? And then she stretched out her hands and she showed me the land and the place where the nails had been driven. She said, these are the stakes that stand between you and your place in the land of the living. eyes, become your light, become your sight, become yours. When all the world around me leaves me empty, all the colors here, yet I am blind. The beauty of this place does not reach me. Here inside the fault lines of my mind, I thought I was a sailor on the water, always dreaming of some distant shore. But now I see this moment be my altar, upon which must burn all thoughts of boats and oars. I can no longer navigate by reason. I do not trust it knows this course it charts. And deep within a voice cries out treason, and I turn now towards the beacon of my heart. Who will love me now? I am on fire here. Who will touch me now? I have no skin. I'm torn upon the rocks that I might cling to. By all I once believed, I am condemned. Give me strength that I might not turn from this moment. Courage to stand firm in this place, and wait here till the doors long closed be opened. And every step I take in grace. See now how the road goes on forever. See now how this journey never ends. It is not ours to lay claim to the weather, but to bow before it all and say the work I was doing, all the therapy or the meditation or all the breathing. But gradually I was becoming more reconciled to my cross, more reconciled to my suffering, and I didn't seem to need to push it away as much or to float off above it. And even when I did, I could sense the gentle but firm hands of my ancestors holding me down. I could hear the voices of my grandmothers telling me that I needed to stay in my body, that I needed to stay in my own experience. If I wanted to know anything about truth or love, I needed to stay in the reality of my own experience. They're like, well, where else did you think you would find it? You know, which of course is a good question, but we did think we would find it somewhere else. Or I did anyway. So I sat through, and continue, this is an ongoing process, but sitting through the pain and screaming through the anger and the sense of betrayal and breathing through the terror and the self-loathing and all the feelings that I had handed over to the emperor and said I should never have to feel these again. And the more I sat through them, the more it became apparent to me that what was holding me down wasn't the feelings themselves, nor the experiences that gave rise to them. What was holding me down, of course, was my refusal to know them. I was effectively splitting off and saying, you are unknowable, you're unacceptable, you're unlovable, you're unpalatable. I was refusing to dine at the table of my own humanity, the table of truth, the emperor's table. And it seemed to me now that my granny and my great-grandmother and all the ancestors and the cows and the tomato plants, they were all conspiring to get me to dine at this table, to stay here and dine with all the guests of my own heart. And it seemed that what was being asked was just to say yes to what was already happening, and that just saying yes or welcoming something in or amen itself was an act of love, but it was also somehow the key to opening, I suppose, to opening for the flow or the flowering of love. And I thought, well, the iconic image of somebody saying yes to everything, to the palatable and the unpalatable, of course, was the image of Christ on a cross, bowing his head and saying amen. And maybe that's why I was being drawn back to this image over and over again. I thought, that's maybe, I'm still trying to work that out, why that's still important to me, even though I don't really identify with the tradition. Anyway, I went back down to the foot of the cross, all the way back to Calvary, before my granny and granny got there, before the church and its theologies. And I looked up and I saw a man, he was struggling for breath. He was screaming in agony. And I said, Jesus, I can't make any of this right, but I just want you to know that I see. There is only one way, and there is only one church. There is but one true God, and her name is love. So not in my name these wars that you fight, not in my name these wrongs and these rights. These are not my ways, not my wars, not my words, not my cause. No, my way is love. So let there be no words but these. What you do unto those, you do unto me. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and I am love. See how the light it shines always, though it seems only dark clouds fill your days. Still through it all, the light of love it shines on and on. So let there be no doubt, no fear. There is no other way, there is no one else here. We are the way, the truth, and the light. guitar strings might prefer a gig. Not too bad. So, something I've had tremendous difficulty reconciling myself to has been the undeniably religious content of my songs. There used to be just sort of the occasional metaphor and allusion, but now I'm taking whole passages like I am the way, the truth, and the life. There's no denying where it came from. And there's another song I've cut out of the show, but it's in the album, and it goes like this: "Yea, though a man had the faith to move mountains, but he has not love, he have nothing." Now I should have known the language was mine, but I still thought, sounds kind of cool, and I went with it. And of course, as soon as I had it recorded, I discovered that it came right out of some chapter of Paul's letter to the Corinthians 13. There's another verse in it that's like something about the voice of the angels, almost verbatim. I think they don't have copyright because it's a while ago, but still. They won't be coming looking for their royalties, but still, it was a bit embarrassing. Anyway, I used to think when these things arose that it was sort of the last vestiges of the religion of my ancestors still in my brain. It's like my brain hadn't really figured out that I no longer needed this religion, and it behaved toward it like it would a phantom limb. But now I think when things like this arise, it's more like the wisdom that arises before it's crystallized into a religion or dogma or set of beliefs. So I am the way, the truth, and the life now doesn't feel pompous to me. It feels like it's a reminder that I am my own spiritual authority, and that my life and my experience is my spiritual path. And that's where I need to look to for direction, rather than out to any gurus or priests or anything else that I need to honor what I'm experiencing. And one of the ways I think this soul orients us, and I should say, I don't know what I mean by the word soul. You can do that as a songwriter. You can't do that as a philosopher. You have to define it. But, I think the things that we're drawn to, the things we love doing, for me, it's like music and going to bed. There are soul's way of orienting us in the world and reminding us of who we are and getting us to express who we are. And I was thinking about this once when I was in the middle of another meditation retreat, and I should have been meditating. And I was thinking about it, and I was wondering what my mother's thing was, because my mother had been, even though I've described her as a liar and a murderer, I grew up playing the accordion, I didn't grow up singing. But I'd always wanted to sing, so it was a long transition from an accordion-wielding trad player to a genre just defining guitarist. And my mother had actually been quite supportive in that journey, in answering a lot of the questions you'd have to kind of unravel your sense of identity. So I was wondering, I got to this point where I could claim that I was a songwriter, and I thought, well, what's my mother's thing? What's the thing that really brought her life? So as soon as I came out of the retreat, I was living in Portland, Oregon, and I called her and I said, Mom. I said, Mom, what did you really love to do when you were younger? What would you really have liked to have done? And she said, I can't think of anything. All I ever really wanted was a moment's peace. She could understand with 7 children, all the atheists amongst us, and the delusional fantasist of songwriting she had for her daughter. Anyway, I wasn't going to let it go, so I kept pushing it. I said, no, Mom, there must have been something. And finally she said, well, I suppose when I was really young, I really wanted to sing. Now, I was floored because never in my whole journey did my mother mention that she had had a dream of singing. And you would think it would come out, but she didn't. So I said to her, why didn't you, Mom? Why, because there's other singers in your family. Because we have to think of identifying who singers are and aren't. I think it's actually not a great idea, but at that point there was. And I said, and she is a good singer. I said, why didn't you? And she said, I suppose, because when I was younger, I was put out of the choir, and that's where I lost my confidence. Now, I've heard that so many times since, but at that moment of post-enlightenment clarity, I just flew into a rage, because it was so obvious to me there that desire to sing, particularly in a choir, is just holy. It's of God, whatever God is. It's spiritual, that desire to give expression in a child. And the people who took it upon themselves, and it wasn't always the priests, there was a lot of old biddies in those choirs who kind of had voices that were 3 octaves above the rest of us, who were determining what was a good voice or not. So I was in a fury that somebody had taken it upon themselves to tell her that she wasn't worthy of being in the choir. Of course, as soon as I got off the phone, I had to come up with this song. Wanna know now what you dream of when you wake in the night? You say you want peace, but you don't say what it is you fight. Wanna know now if the ocean comes to call you to pray? it ask you to rise with the wind and call out those dreams you betrayed? And tell me, do you go then to love and fire, to be raised by the wind and lifted on the wings of desire? I want to tell you that the ocean, it is not as it seems. We are not our thoughts nor we the players in those scenes. And all those things they told us, they were just stories and lies. No, it's not like what they said at all. We are soul in disguise. And there are none of us not called here, none untouched by the flame. We were born, we were formed, we were scored to be praising her name. Just to sing, Mama, just to sing, Mama, just to sing. 'Cause we were never angels, we were not meant to be. Beyond the cares in our hearts and the ways that they see. So tell me, can you hear it? The voice deep inside that whispers, though all the world may desert you, still you are the light. Still you are the truth here. Still you are the way. Still you, only you can be true to this part that you play. So tell me, will you go now? Will you answer that call? To be unto all that rise within you, to be unto it all. To be only this, just to be all this, all of this. 'Cause we were never angels, we are not of that fire. But as we are of God, we cannot be unworthy of the choir. We are so, Mama, we are so, Mama, we are fire. On the wings of our dreams, they were forged in the coals of desire. Only desire, Mama, only desire, Mama. This is desire, Mama. I'm on fire, Mama. I'm on fire, Mama. I'm on fire. So, if I had said when I was younger, Mother, I am the way, the truth, and the life, I would have been landed in the middle of next week. Metaphorically, because they weren't violent people, but it wouldn't have been pleasant. And if my mother had said it when she was younger, or my granny, they would have been landed into one of those asylums or those institutions for troublesome women, right? And of course, 400 years ago, when women wanted to claim their own authority, their own spiritual authority, their own sovereignty over their own way of seeing, they were burned at the stake, right? And 2,000 years ago, the man whose prerogative it seems to have become to say it, well, he was crucified. So, and in all of our rooms, in most of our houses, there was an image of what happened to someone who said that. Yeah, my granny was a singer, a riddler, and a scripture like me. She said, "We hope you liked our song, we know it does go on." You know, you get that from your great-granddaddy. Now what's done is done, can't be undone, and what's said can't be unsaid. Your granddaddy said to tell your daddy he's sorry, and for you not to be bothering the dead. And who taught you to lie, taught you to fly, that you might remember the dead to the living. And who gave you the land, put the gun in your hand, that his debts might someday be forgiven. And who gave you the song and the strength to go on, said it's time now to bother the living. So get up out of bed, take the gun from your head, and tell them the dead have arisen. She said, tell them the only thing that matters here, the only thing that matters here is love. All the rest is just the stories we were given, some impressions of God's shadow in the cup. Shall I tell you how it is to be standing here, to be standing right here with you, right here, right now, here where my thoughts arise, here where my soul abides, here where my spirit rises and soars on through it all. Feels like love rising inside me. Feels like light filling my days. Feels like all I've come to guide me, find and remind me I am the way. Shall I tell you how it is in the morning time, clouds whistle in the warm sunshine, and I am alive, here where I am flesh and blood, and all that arises is love, here where my spirit forms and cries out that I am. I am love, rising inside you. I am light, filling your days. I am all I've come to guide you, find and remind you, you are the way. Now, if this is my song, or my show, this is where we'd be finishing now. I'd be packing up my guitar and dismantling my cross, heading over to Newman's or something for a drink. But of course, this isn't my show, and I can hear my granny in the background saying to my grandfather, "Well, what do you have to say to your granddaughter now?" He said, she called us all liars. She called you and your father and your grandfather, she called you all liars. What do you have to say? My grandfather didn't really like confrontation with women. He shrugged, actually. He said, "I think it's time for bed." But my granny wasn't having any of it. She said, "You're not coming near this bed now until you can say one thing, one encouraging thing to your granddaughter, who's taken our song and she's made it into a fabulous show, and now she's about to go out and spread the gospel of Matthew." The most seditious, the most subversive, the most dangerous gospel of them all. You must have one encouraging thing. My grandfather goes quiet for a while, and I can hear him talking to my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather. By the way they're talking, I can hear them hammering out of a verse of a song. I got a bit worried because, well, they're the generation who had nothing better to do of an evening but write a song with 140 verses. And I was feeling like, this needs to come to an end now. Finally, anyway, my grandfather comes back and he says to me, says, Catherine, some might call your story lies. Some will call it poetry. Your granny said it's a work of genius, and blessed are those who can see it. And I have no song but the song of my mother. I have no voice, the voice of all things. And here I am, standing proud by her shoulders, knowing all that I know here is that I am. In my every breath, I'm one with the forest. In my every song, I'm one with the wind. See how all these things be my wisdom that I find within them, love that I am, and I am, and I own, and I am, and I own, and I am, and I own. Sinead. I just wanted to hugely thank Karen, who encouraged me from the get-go with this and who's made this happen. Woo! Thank Julia along and Paul, who I go along, and they made this room there. And thank Corey along, who's going to make it all look sort of professional and
Bye.
so thanks for coming. And thanks for coming out, of course, it only happens.
Just a sincere thanks to everyone for coming along. It became such a gorgeous atmosphere. It was just absolutely beautiful. Catherine, I think, will be performing, pretending to be a producer here. Catherine won't be performing. I think probably the spring again. You'll have a clatter of perform. If you could spread the word, it would be fantastic. And her CDs.
Oh yes.
Karen, could I just suggest we give her a name?